Welcome to Microcap Explosions. This is Mariusz Konieczny, and I am talking with Lorraine Reguly, who is an editor. And I'm talking with her because this is the second interview. Right after I did a book with Andy, I wanted to bring her on and talk about the publishing process because some of you reached out to me and wanted to know. And I think the best way to do it is just to bring someone like Lorraine on. So, Lorraine, thanks for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome. My little cat is beside me too, wanting attention. So hope that's not going to be too much of a problem.
Oh, it's going to be
So,
okay. So, yeah. So, tell us from from your point of view, if somebody wants to write a book, what are the steps? What should they think about?
okay, so writing a book is the first step in actually publishing a book. And, there's so many different things that people can do. It depends on the person's natural skills. If they have excellent organizational skills, they might already have it logically flowing in their head. For people who don't know how to sort of put it together, what they can start out with doing would be a mind map or just a brainstorming session, writing down all of the different things that they want to cover in their book. And then once they have those different points listed, you could put it together in sort of an outline form, like, oh, this has to go first and then this. And so it flows logically. And then, writing each chapter or each component of that list on your mind map or your list of on chapters, as you will, on the outline, putting that together. And, once you have that finished, I mean, this is the hardest part of writing the book for most people, is actually writing the book, because it takes time. And, people have families and kids and jobs and, and finding that time to actually sit down and focus to write can be difficult for a lot of people. So one of my suggestions to overcome that is to set aside 10 minutes a day. As soon as you turn your computer on for the day, sit down and write for the first 10 minutes. Once you knock that off of your list, like, you can go about your whole day and you at least have accomplished that. And most people find that when they do that, they get into such a flow that they want to continue on. So it gives them that momentum and that motivation to want to continue to finish. I mean, I watched the interview with Andy. As you know, I was his editor, just helped him publish his book. And he said that he wrote his book in 3 weeks, and then 4 to 5 after reorganizing things a little bit. So, I mean, people, think that, oh, it's going to take months or years. And granted, some people it does take that long, but for a lot of people, it depends on the content. And, if you know your subject matter well, if it's nonfiction, for example, like Andy's is, then you can bang out a book in a month. People think it's more difficult than what it really is. So
Yeah, and
that's the first step.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. So that's the first step.
So once you've written your book and you've, maybe gotten feedback from others on it, a lot of people, I suggest, have beta readers or friends or colleagues that will read their book and give honest feedback. The problem with friends is that they just want to support you and be nice to you and, like, oh, wow, congratulations. Yeah, it's good. And they don't really know maybe what is actually wrong. They don't see the mistakes like an editor would, for example. But getting as much feedback from other people before you send it to an editor for the final polish is definitely recommended. And it's what a lot of writers do, because they want to know, like, well, are people going to resonate with this? Is this something that people want? Getting good feedback like that's very valuable. So once all of that's been done and the book is basically ready to publish in the author's eyes, that's when it's time to hire a professional, because a professional will catch everything that your friends and colleagues missed. So they'll also fix any grammatical errors. They'll be able to spot, typos, not necessarily typos, but misuse of words. Like, for example, sore and sore, homophones, that words that sound the same, that are spelled differently, that people misuse all the time. There, and there, two, and two. There's so many different things that people don't get right. It's and it's, one with a comma, one with an apostrophe and one without. Your and your, you are is your, you apostrophe re, which is you are. And then there's your, like, as in ownership, like your shirt, your hair, your whatever, right? So an editor is really helpful in not only catching all of these little things, which are actually, pretty big things, because when you make mistakes and other people spot them and they look at you and they think, okay, well, how could you let this mistake happen? If you're trying to put out a professional book, you want to make sure that it's definitely professional. Everything's edited to perfection. Everything looks great. And that's another step of the publishing process, is once you have your book edited, then you're going to need it formatted properly so that it looks nice. And, there's several steps going through the process to actually get your book up on Amazon. So I'm not sure what you want me, if you want me to talk about the exact order.
Well, what I found interesting about you, and I haven't personally worked with you. You haven't edited any of my books, because by the time I met you, I already had mine published, but I wished that I knew you before. But when I reached out to you to help Andy, what was interesting is that you don't just edit, because I'm used to this person just edits, someone else designs your cover, someone else does the interior, and then someone else, most of the time yourself, you just upload it to Amazon or Kindle Publishing, and you hope and pray that it will get accepted. You have a different system. It's almost like you're the publisher, and that's unusual.
Well, the interesting thing here, I'm going to tell you a little story, because I didn't always have the knowledge of how to put a book up on Amazon. I had to learn just like anyone else. And back in 2013, that's when I had, my dream of becoming an author. And so I learned, because I actually written a book when I was in university way back in 1997, a couple of years before I graduated. It was in my third year of university. And I took a studies in Canadian poetry course. And one of the options that were given to the students on the very first day was to write a book over the course of the semester using all of the things that we learned in class to apply to different poetry, do poetry analysis and all these kinds of things, or write a 2-week take-home exam. So this option was given to the students on the first day of class. And I thought, wow, this is so cool. I'm going to write the book. And so I did. And when I submitted it at the end of the semester and got feedback on it from the professor, I received 90% on it. She said it was the highest in the class, and she urged me to get it published. And this is back in the days before self-publishing. Self-publishing is fairly new. So I had purchased a copy of The Writer's Market, which lists all of the publishing companies in Canada, the US, and basically even international ones. And I went through, and under each little, it's like a little paragraph. And under each little paragraph, it said what this publisher will publish, whether it's poetry, whether it's fiction, the type of genres they will, whether it's sci-fi, horror, mystery, romance, whatever it is that they will publish, how many they publish per year, And when the different things, if you need to submit a query letter on all these different things. I mean, it was a really informative book, and I had to, weed through tons, pages. Like the book is like this thick, like it's huge. And so it took a lot of research in order to find somebody who wanted to publish my book. And then, of course, like many of us, life gets in the way. We get busy. I was a single mom at the time. I was still going to university. And I just put that project off to the wayside. So years went by, and, I tried to get back into it. And I thought, oh, I'm going to, it's time I should send out some query letters and see about getting this book published. And again, I got sidetracked with life. And finally, in 2013, by this point, my son's all grown up. I'm done school. I'm done, I'm done working. I've got time. And I bought another copy, an updated copy, the 2013 Writers Market. And lo and behold, I start reading about this new thing called self-publishing. And I'm like, self-publishing, like anybody can put a book up on Amazon? What is this all about? And so I started reaching out to, at the time there, the keyword was indie authors, independently published authors. So I started reaching out to different indie authors on social media and made connections. And I came across this one lady named Melissa Bowersock. She has a website called Word Lovers. And now she's written, I have lost count of how many books. She must have 30, 40, 50. I'm not even sure. And she and I did an interview with her, and it's on my website. And she taught me sort of the ins and outs of self-publishing and what it was about. And I thought, this is really fascinating. Technology has improved so much to the point where, people can have their own websites now. People can, do anything. They can start businesses online. They can put books up on Amazon. They can make money doing whatever. And it was really fascinating to me. And so I went through the steps of self-publishing. And I put together a little short book of like 5 short stories that I did. And this was my first book published in 2014. And I had somebody do the cover. I didn't really like it, but whatever. So I went through the steps, and it turned out like, to look at it, it's got the copyright page, just like any professional book, the introduction, table of contents, and, everything like all lines up perfectly, the top and bottom, page numbers, everything. And so I thought, okay, I can actually do this. Like, I can help other people publish their books. And it was really interesting because the reason that I ended up publishing this so quickly was because I had a blind friend, Maxwell Ivy. He's actually known as the Blind Blogger. He wanted to publish a book, and I hadn't published mine yet. And he said, Lorraine, like, I know you're learning about the steps of self-publishing. Can you help me with my book? And I thought, okay, yes, I can do this. So I went through, I published mine. Everything turned out great. So then I helped him publish his first book. It's called Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light, A Blind Man's Inspirational Guide to Success. And again, turned out just fabulous. So at that point, I was like, maybe I should add this to my business, because I had been working as a freelance writer and editor. I'm an English teacher. I was trained as that. I've always loved reading and writing. I've always been, one to be the grammar police, pick out all the different errors when I'm reading. And so I had been working as a freelance writer and editor. And once I published these 2 books, both mine and Max's, I thought, maybe I should just add this to my list of things that I do. And so So I did, and Max was, really, he was actually instrumental in helping me grow my business, because he raved about so many, to so many people about my skills on social media, that I started getting referrals just from people that he knew. And over time, my business grew. And, now, I mean, I don't have copies of every book that I've edited, but here's like a stack of autograph copies that I have over the years. And that's just part of it. There's more, because these books are pretty heavy, as you know. I mean, even to the point where one turned out like a manual. This one here was published by an actual publishing company, but I did the editing on it, and I received an autographed copy of that. And then, so this author here, she's written 2 so far. Lynn Potter Lord, she's a hypnotherapist, and she wrote this one, which is more like a textbook than anything else, and she made a teacher's edition. And then she started writing a little mini series of other books, and this one here is about the Dead Sea Salt. But over time, like, we started incorporating pictures into the books. So if you're someone who wants to have pictures in your books, that's easily done. Here's another illustration. I know it's really hard to see on camera here, but there's so many different things. Even in my second book that I wrote, I ended up putting a lot of pictures in it as well. Not a lot, sorry, a few. So I mean, that's something that some people can, and mine's in color. This was one of the original ones, so you can even make books available in color. But yeah, it was so fascinating to me. So over the years, I started working more and more with first-time authors, because as word grew about the self-publishing existence, people started thinking, okay, well, here's my chance. Like, I can write a book and I can publish it. And that's what a lot of people started doing. And Andy, he's an expert in his field. So he wrote a book on investing in mobile home parks. Lynn's an expert in her field, and she wrote, the food mood connection, the connection between the gut and the brain, and, the gut brain microbiome relationship. Other people have, written books in their niches, and it's really interesting for me. I love my job because I get to learn and read about so many different things. I mean, I didn't know anything about investing in mobile home parks until I read Andy's book, and now I know a lot. So it's pretty cool that I even get to learn as I do my job. So it's, that part's really cool. Now, going back to the steps of publishing. Okay. I know I tend to get carried away, and I apologize. I go on.
Before you do that, does it even make sense at this point for people to publish the book the traditional way before self-publishing?
That's a really good question, because there's pros and cons to both. Like with the traditional model, the pro is that most of the distribution, they get into bookstores, like different brick and mortar bookstores. They get distributed more widely. The con with traditional publishing is you don't have the control that you do with self-publishing. You often can't pick your cover. You can't pick your editor. If something is worded a different way, like, the editor will change something and you have no say in the matter. Whereas with self-publishing, even though I correct, and improve the flow of the words or the paragraphs, or, whatever in the book, I always send it back to my client showing those changes. And the client will say, yes, I approve these changes, or I like all of them except for, this one or this one. I'm going to reword this my own way, and you can, look at it again and re-edit it again. So you don't have that control in the traditional publishing model, only in the self-publishing. Another thing is that time-wise, because publishing companies have so many books that they're trying to get out to the world, there's a backlog. So sometimes you have to wait a year, 2 years, maybe 3, maybe longer before your book actually gets out into the world.
You know, for me, it was like when I was writing my first book, I reached out to a few publishers and agents, and very quickly there was no interest because I didn't have any following at that point.
Right.
And I was thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to have someone control my future and someone tell me, yes, you're good enough to publish it or not. And that's how I was just like, I'm just going to do it on my own.
Yes. And that's the thing. You don't necessarily, like with self-publishing, you have that freedom. You could do it now. And another really good thing about self-publishing is once your files are uploaded on Amazon, and say that like Andy, he said he had forgotten to add a couple of things in, and he later went back and did that. You have that power to do that when you're a self-publisher, because all you have to do is re-upload a different file to Amazon and wait the 24 hours or whatever to be approved, and then boom, it's there. You don't have to go through months and months of waiting for the second edition to come out. Like, you could do it instantaneously with self-publishing. And the validation part that you were talking about people saying like, oh, well, maybe it's not very good, or that's one editor sitting in a publishing house that gets your email and looks at your manuscript and says, oh no, maybe they don't like it. So, and they think, oh, well, maybe no one else is going to like it. Or, maybe they don't have the knowledge that, this niche actually exists, and this book will, fill that void that's been missing in that niche. So, there's so many different variables. Like you said, a following. You didn't have a following. Well, yeah, but you know what? You probably still had people who were interested in what you were writing about and said, hey, go ahead and write this. Just like Andy, you encouraged Andy to write a book. Now he's got a book out there, and it took less than 3 months all told for him to write and publish the book. Whereas if you were to, and that's going from writing to publishing in his case. Whereas, if you go with a traditional publisher, after you've written the book, you're still waiting years.
Yeah, and not only that, if you go, what I learned, I don't know if it's the same. If I go with a traditional publisher, I might get 20% of what the book sells for, and then the rest goes to the publisher and distribution. If I write it myself, I am the publisher. Amazon gets its cut, but I get everything. So
that's right.
So now I have some incentive to maybe go out and market it or try to sell it. What incentives do I have if I get $1 for a $20 book? And then usually the traditional publishers are not going to do anything much for you anyway, unless you're Barack Obama or somebody with huge following. Yeah, they're going to push it. But if you're just little guy out there, you're not going to get much help.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. And if you have a literary agent, you have to pay them their 15% as well. Everybody takes their cut. And by the time it gets to you, like you say, $1 out of maybe every 20 is yours. So where is the incentive there? It's not really, the only reason that there's an incentive there is because of the distribution. If they can get it into the hands of 1 million people, well, okay, then, for every book you're getting, maybe that's $1 million. But you're going to be waiting years and years. And that's only if the publisher decides that they want to publish your book. Whereas with Amazon, if you put your book up there, it's there. There's so many things that can be done to promote your book. And I don't specifically, this is a whole niche all on its own. So I don't work in that particular field. I know that you can go have book signings. You can contact the library, maybe do one there. You can have events in person or online. You can you can go on tours, you can do so many different things. Amazon will also help promote your book because, I'm sure anybody who's ever bought anything off Amazon will know that it's customers who bought this also viewed or also bought, and then your little book will come up if someone else bought a similar book or something in that field. So Amazon will even promote you, and that's automatic. Like, you don't have to do a thing there for marketing your book. Amazon does the work there. Social media, your friends can share your posts, and picture that little tree, right? One person shares to two, a couple people, each person shares, and then the little tree trickles down, and all of a sudden now you got, the whole group of people who have seen and maybe purchased your book. I just helped a lady publish a poetry book called A Poem a Day. Her name's Lo Mackett. And she, within a week and a half of publishing it on Amazon, it was this number 7 in her category of women publishers in the literary field. So it hit number 7. And so when Amazon, when you've made some sales, your book obviously goes up in the rankings. Amazon will even promote it more because it's ranked higher. So it'll show it more with its algorithms. And, word of mouth spreads, of course, especially if you have a book launch. And that's what Andy's doing now. He said he's having an event at the end of the month or wherever, and he's going to have copies of his book available to buy. So that's another thing that you can do. There's so many different things that you can do. And that's, in a way, that's almost, it's a positive and a negative of self-publishing, because the work is put on you as the author to help promote your own book. And this ties into what I was talking about with the writer's market, because back in 2013, when I learned about the existence of self-publishing, it also said that regardless of what route you take, whether it's traditional or self-publishing, the author is expected to promote their own book on social media, regardless of what route you take. The author's expected to do that. So that right there, when I read that, I thought, okay, maybe I should just self-publish my book. Maybe I should just do this. And so, there's a lot to think about in terms of what route you want to take. But most people now tend to choose the self-publishing route because of the freedoms that you have with the control, the ability that you have to easily change or add to the interior of the book. If new information comes out and you all of a sudden want to update your book, you can easily do that.
And also, people publish books for different reasons, right? You might publish it because you want to make money. You might publish it because it increases your status, or you might publish it because you want, like Andy, for example. He gets a lot of calls for mobile home parks. He can just say to someone new, "Here's my book, buy it, read it, and then we can have a conversation." So there's many different reasons that people do it, and it's all great.
Well, yeah, because you can go and buy a $10 book on Amazon, get the information, or maybe the alternative is hiring Andy and his pay the consulting fee of whatever it is, 100, 300. I don't know how much he charges per hour. So you're also saving money in that sense, and you're helping people at the same time as you're helping them save money. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, and yes, the status that you have, especially if you're an entrepreneur online in today's world, which there are so many people, especially since COVID. I think the numbers, like, I don't know what the statistics are, if it's tripled or quadrupled or how many X times, but becoming an entrepreneur and having expertise in a field. If you can say that, hey, I've written a book, this will help you increase your credibility as an online expert. People tend to look at you a little bit more, with a little bit more respect when you can say, oh, yes, I've published a book. Or, oh, yes, I've published a dozen books or whatever, And in the nonfiction field, the self-help industry has been just, incredibly hot the last several years. People are really into the personal development field. They're into improving, their coaching is a huge industry right now. And there's so many different facets of coaching. So coaches tend to write about their methods and what they've learned and so on and so forth.
Are there any mistakes that you can share, like that people can avoid or should avoid while trying to get their book out?
Yeah, not doing their due diligence with looking for a reputable editor, for sure. There's so many people out there who just want to make money as a freelance editor who don't necessarily have the skills or qualifications to actually do that. I mean, if you look on my website in the first, I'm just going to pull it up quick on my computer.
What's your website? Share your website.
My website is Wording Well.
Wordingwell.com. I'll put it in the description for those that are interested.
Wordingwell.com. And the second line on my homepage, it says, I'm an editor, a writer, an author, a coach, and a certified English teacher. And in brackets, I put, see my teaching credentials. So immediately I link to where I live in Canada, in Ontario. And so I've received 2 degrees from university. And here is a link showing, if you click the link, it brings you to the Ontario teachers website. And, and you can see that I'm a person in good standing. So I actually have these credentials. Secondly, I've been blogging. I'm known as one of the successful copywriting experts, blah, blah, blah. Then I help people become authors, and I link to the steps of becoming a self-published author. And so if people are interested, there's an infographic that you can easily look at, the 16 steps. So write the book, edit the book, finalize the book's text, add images if you desire, write a description, obtain an ISBN for each version, if you want a digital version and a print version. And then you have to format it. Then you have to create the cover. Once you've created your KDP, your Kindle Direct Publishing account for Amazon, you have to, and this is part of the author's responsibility, is to hook up your bank account and fill out your tax information, and fill out the necessary information on the fields for each version of your book. After you upload the appropriate files, proof your book using the previewer, approve your files, fix any spacing issues, then approve your files and click publish. I mean, there's so many different various steps to the book publishing process that I've laid this all out in a blog post so people can go through it. And throughout each step of the way, I will help the author accomplish what they need to do. And that's part of the author assistance services that I provide. So like Andy was saying, he didn't upload his own files to Amazon. I took care of that for him. He didn't want to be bothered. Like, not that he didn't want to be bothered. It was just like easier to get me to do it, because he's got so many other responsibilities. And so, and so I asked him if he wanted me to hit the publish button for him, or if he wanted to review everything that I had done. He's like, no, go ahead and, let's publish this as soon as possible. And I was like, okay. And so I did, and he's super happy. So, in terms of helping Andy with the process, I know that he raved about working with me. There's a lot to self-publishing alone, but with working with me is I help make it easier for people. I explain the steps in order that we need to take them, what you're responsible for, what I'll be responsible for. Once things are in place, like once he created, well, he had already had his KDP account because he had previously published the book about motorcycles. And so that was already in place. When I worked with Lo Mackett, she had to create her own account. And it's easy to create an account, fill out some information for tax purposes, and then hook up a bank account, which takes a few days, up to maybe a week, for everything to go through the verification process, because you want to get paid, right? You want to get paid your royalties when people buy from Amazon. So you have to do these things beforehand. I think the toughest part that Andy had a problem with was getting the ISBNs assigned to each version of his book, because he purchased a 10-pack. It's cheaper to buy a 10-pack if you're in the States. ISBNs for Canadians are free. So depending on where you live in the world, you're going to have to research, like, what your local or your country's laws are. There's only one, and I want to caution people on this, there's only one licensed ISBN broker out there, and it's called Bowker. It's through the ISBN myidentifiers.com service. That's the only place that you can get ISBNs. I just worked with an author who, she was with a publishing company. She decided not to renew her contract, and she decided to self-publish her books on Amazon. She purchased ISBNs from some fake company, and they didn't work. So she got ripped off, and she ended up having to go and buy them a second time from the proper place. So, I mean, there's mistakes that people make like that. And I don't know if that's the kind of mistakes you're talking about, if you're talking about editing mistakes. Because, I mean, there's tons, like I was saying, regarding your
No,
narrative there.
this is exactly the kind of thing that I wanted to hear. So, I mean, let me ask you the final question. Is there anything else that you would like to add from yourself, before we give out your contact information, about the publishing business, before we wrap up the interview?
Well, I've worked with a lot of first-time authors, and that's sort of my area of expertise, because I know how overwhelming it can be. And I generally, when people reach out to me, they say, oh, I have this book and I want to publish it. Can you help me? I will ask them, like, what specifically do they need from me? Because I do offer so many services. You have to consider if you're publishing a book as a digital version and a print version. So you need to consider those two things. Cover files. You need to have a cover designer. I don't personally do the cover design work, but I have a cover designer who does, and he will do unlimited revisions until you're perfectly happy with it. And his files, because Amazon's very picky about their specifications, your book file has to meet their guidelines and specifications in order to be accepted. And a lot of cover designers, they'll come up with a really nice cover, but they don't know how to create the actual files. So the formatting of the files is included with that. And he works with me, my cover designer, through my company, and that's a service that I also offer. Secondly, another thing is formatting of the book. Like you were saying, how it looks inside, everything lines up, looks perfectly. That's another service that I offer. So there's, different things, and they're all listed in this, on my author assistant services site, service page on my website. So people, I just invite you to start doing your research and looking into the steps, and I will help you with every step of the way to make the process as seamless and easy for you as possible, as I did with Andy. I mean, the testimonials that I've received, I'm going to be updating my website with them soon because I've got like 6 new ones that I have to add. So it's just, I just help people make their process so much easier.
Yeah.
And that's about all I have to say.
Okay, perfect. So
yeah.
in the final, just if people want to reach out to you, your website, phone number, or email, whatever it is that you want to share, go ahead.
Wordingwell.com, and email is probably the best or easiest way to get a hold of me, or through Facebook Messenger, because I do have that on my phone. So I'll see that probably before I even see an email. So however you're comfortable reaching out to me is fine. I'm a pretty friendly person, so all you have to do is ask. And if you want to set up a phone call to discuss things, I'm open to that as well, or a Zoom call, or messenger call, like whatever technology you want to use. I'm pretty open. I mean, you called me, Marius, and within moments of our conversation, you were emailing me Andy's manuscript, and I did a sample edit for him like within the hour. So I'm pretty good at responding to people quickly as well.